just after 7:30. So welcome everybody who's come to the Parish Council meeting. Our County Association of the Parishes in Kent consulted with the relevant authorities and has instructed us that PCs should hold a 2-minute silence at their next council meeting, which is tonight for us, in memory of our late Sovereign Queen Elizabeth II, and therefore can I ask everyone to stand, please? Thank you. Whoever it was has gone again. Right. Apologies and reasons for absence.
Councillor Sam Collins' childcare problem, and Borough Councillor Mick Burgess has another meeting, I presume.
Oversight and Scrutiny Committee. Declaration by members of any interest peculiar or other than pecuniary in accordance with the Council's Code of Conduct and its guide for the declaration of Council's interest and related matters.
No.
No.
I've got one. Let's just wait for... Hello.
Hello. Good evening.
Alison.
Yes. Hello.
Yes, the owner of Pine View has come in the past and quoted, or came to look at a job in my house. He didn't quote it in the end, and he didn't do it, and it has been done. So that's a very minor, other than it doesn't affect anything otherwise. Okay, so there are no applications to be put to the meeting for approving or rejecting for dispensations. A reminder to everybody that the meeting is being recorded for publication on the internet, assuming it works. Okay, we now move to the public session. Now, just a few words for me to introduce it, because people generally weren't here last time we met, which was in July. We don't meet in August. We met in July. We don't meet in August and September. the meeting didn't happen because it fell within the public mourning of Our Late Queen. But in July, when few members of the public were in attendance, I think only one, the council made some revisions to its arrangements for conducting public sessions during its meetings in response to experience at the June meeting, and to bring these arrangements more closely into line with standing orders and to remove the opportunities for confusion. Within the overall discretion of the chairman, the public session will have an overall time limit of 20 minutes, and individuals will be limited to 3 minutes each. The former has always been in standing orders, and the latter is now in line with normal practice. As standing orders in Wittersham earlier were changed to provide for 4 minutes, but we've now reverted to 3, which is the usual for most councils and is in the standard template. To facilitate smooth working of this system, members of the public will be asked at the start of the public session whether they wish to speak and on what topic. As before, contributions from the public are limited to items on the agenda, questions for which an answer may be given at the time or deferred and perhaps answered in writing, and points which are being suggested for a possible future agenda item or for consideration. Points from the public are not open to debate, and as always, the session is chaired by the chairman of the council, which is myself. Notes of these arrangements, in slightly different words, have been put on the seats for guidance. Please don't take them away with you, because we'll use them each time. So that is just for everyone to know, they are the arrangements, and we changed them at the previous meeting. Okay, so the question therefore is, excuse my throat getting a bit froggy, No, I'll be all right, don't continue. I don't think the drink will make any difference, that's the problem, but thank you for offering. The first question then is, who is expecting to want to speak? I can see there's an application, that's a planning application, Alison and or...
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I never remember your name. Alan, I always remember Alison's and not yours, Alan. Are you thinking of speaking, Nicholas?
Yes.
Yes, and Miriam?
Perhaps if there's something to respond to.
Okay, it might. Right, okay, we normally do the planning applications first, so let's look at them in order. And the first one on the list is land south of 63 Street. This is slightly unusual because it was put through in earlier months. This parish council put forward a comment on it. It was recorded wrongly by Ashford as a support because comment was not allowed at that time in their new system, but it has been made plain since in another comment that it was a comment. Anyhow, what has happened since all of that is that the plan has been changed slightly. The size of the barn has been reduced. I think that was the main change, wasn't it?
And change of use in the...
Oh, and change of use in the description to stables or some similar wording. And normally, Ashford would simply just carry on with that, but on this occasion, for whatever reason, they sent it back out to us for reconsideration. So we have had a discussion here in July, only because the new system that Ashford had introduced had not properly consulted. We said that we didn't feel that we should decide it at that time. And it therefore was left that we would either do it in September or it would be delegated to the clerk. As it happened, we would have done it in September had our meeting not been cancelled by the royal death, and then Ashford were unwilling to extend the period any longer, so it was done under delegation. And now we are back at square one. The applicant is not here tonight. He was here last time. I don't know if anyone wants to speak on land south of 63 would like to.
Yes. My name's John Hampshire.
John
I'm John Hampshire.
Hampshire,
I
yeah.
live down at Ham Green Cottage, which is down the road.
Right.
I got a planning and development
Yeah.
thing through from Ashford Borough Council. I thought this has already been dealt with, but you've explained very thoroughly why
It's come back again.
it's come back again. I don't have any objections at all to it. I think after what the last planning application was, this seems like a very good alternative to that big house. Rather strange looking, not really in keeping with the village at all.
With the objective, yeah.
Yes, yes. So really, my idea of coming up here tonight was to understand why it has gone through again, which you've now explained. But really, that's it. Just
Okay.
that I have no objection.
Okay, thank you very much for those comments. Does anyone else want to talk about lands? Nicholas?
Yes, I was asked, in fact, I was sent a questionnaire by Ashford for my comments on 63, which I was actually delighted to receive, but rather surprised that I should get it. But I happen to live virtually at the other side of the road, so I'm the most adjacent person to it. I know the history of the plot of land, and I know that it was already turned down for a planning application. However, I looked at this thing and my comment to Kate Ashford was one thing. I said, Mr. Butt's application does not add up. Why do I say something as simple as that? Is that if I was going to buy a piece of land for horses, stables, etc., I wouldn't do it 5 miles away from my house. Because I understand Mr. Butt lives in Tenterden. Because quite frankly, of course, although this has got fencing around 3 sides of it, it can get out. Some horses can often get out, they can often have problems. And myself, we had horses for my children, they came when I was many years ago. So and the thought of having horses several miles away is mad. So I say, odd, that doesn't add up. So what could be the reason for it? Okay, now we have an application, right, for all of this, and we know that there have been quite a few planning applications of conversions of stables, okay, and barns into property. Oh, sorry, I'll also go back, is that I couldn't understand having horses there because the bridle path, the nearest bridle path is right down by the river. I can't, you would have to come out, you would have to get horse boxes onto that bit of land, adjacent, quite close to the school, and all the problems, okay, of the Blackwater Road. You know, I cannot believe a normal horse person would have, would want to buy that field, because there is no other access. There are 3 ways round that thing, which are all fenced in. So he's got to come out through the front door. So anyhow, I turn around and I say, it doesn't add up. I therefore query, what does Mr. Butt want? And I would say is that he's hoping to get planning permission, although planning permission for the previous house, which was quite a large, extensive house. Okay, I mean, I knew, right, that person, etc. No, I just don't think it'll go through. So my thing, as a chartered accountant, I say 0 out of 10 for addition.
Okay, thank you. Right, does anyone else want to say anything on that?
Oh, the other aspect, okay, is I think
Just
is
quickly.
relevant, is that, okay, that there was, just further down Blackwater Road, there is the development, okay, of the old area, which used to be a kennel. Well, somehow, the kennel, which could be likened to has now suddenly become a house, quite a big house, moved in its location, should we say. It's, I'm not over troubled by it, but I'm just saying is that all of these precedents are there.
That's the one at the beaches, which was put through some time ago, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. Which is, of course, quite a big piece of land in general.
Yes.
I wouldn't say it was a conversion of the hut so much as it was approved by Ashford for a house where a hut had been. But I take it. You know, it wasn't conversion of the hut, I don't think.
Well, the hut has got moved
Okay.
into a house.
All right, so that's land south of 63, so I think we're done there. Next one on the list is Wittersham Sports Ground. Removal of condition 2, amplified sound from planning permission, blah blah blah, which was in 1993, which was at the time they got permission to replace the old pavilion, which was destroyed by fire, with the pavilion that is there now. So in 1993, they got planning permission for the current pavilion, but there was a condition put on it that applied in some way to amplified sound, which they are now asking could they have it removed. Does anyone want to talk about that application?
Oh, yes.
You do.
Oh, yes.
Off you go.
I think, have you had, I think Gillian's also given me some notes, Gillian Kirk. Are you going to read hers
It will
out?
be read out
In that
when it
case,
comes
I
to
won't read hers.
No,
So
I'll let read
okay,
out
because
after
otherwise
it.
Alan was going to read
Sure,
mine and
yeah.
I was going to read hers.
Could
Okay, right, I wish...
Could they introduce themselves? Introduce themselves.
Oh, sorry.
Alright. Good idea.
Alison Phillips, Brownie House, I apologise. I just... Right. I wish to
Can I
register...
ask where you live? I don't.
Right directly opposite the sports club. So you have the small meadow, and then we have the Victorian house literally opposite the ground itself.
Well, in the street.
In the
This is
street.
actually
Yeah,
the
just-
back. The back way is towards
Yes.
with the sheep or whatever it is in between.
Yeah, well, there's very rarely sheep with sheep, yes or no. I wish to register an objection to this planning application, and would the Parish Council please note that under location in the application, recreation ground is not on the charitable commission document, okay? Planning permission to build the sports pavilion was granted to the trustees of Wittersham Sports Club, and there is a difference in the meaning of the wording, recreation and sports. Trustees are bound to use the trust property for the promotion of amateur sport, and that was always Lady Mallett's decision, you know, it's her choice when she granted that trust. This trust was set up for the benefit of sport in the village. A small sports pavilion was built and replaced in 1903, as you said, fire. It was granted planning permission, but condition 2 was already, although it was set out as condition 2, the original trust actually indicated that no music or any other amplified sound should be audible at the south boundary, reason to ensure against noise disturbance to the surrounding area or properties. This planning condition is as relevant and reasonable today as it was then. The street is in a conservation area and there's only a small open field between us and the sports field. This unobstructed open space plus lie of the land around it, i.e. the field is slightly higher on the curve above it, acts like a natural amphitheatre in which sound travels readily and clearly. We can hear discussions on the field without amplification. That's not a problem. Electric amplified sound would take it way beyond an acceptable level. I experienced the result of this from the sports field this summer when a marquee was erected suddenly for a private event and loud music was played until late into the evening. I had to write to the trustee and committee about it. Condition 2 was and is for the protection of villagers against noise pollution. The village are fortunate to have use of the sports field for a peppercorn rent of £1 per annum. Regulations set out in the charitable trust were carefully considered and are valid. No amplification. Do you want to say something?
Okay, thank you.
Yes, my question is,
You better introduce yourself.
yes, I'm Alan Phillips, wife of
Said
famous Alison Phillips.
Angry Alison Phillips.
Yeah, we wonder why the request has been put in to remove this condition. I hesitate to make judgments on something which I know nothing about, but one would assume it could be a step for further things to follow on. So, which is negating what originally was a sports facility, becoming something else altogether. And in the last few years, with no pub, I could understand the need for somewhere for people to get together. But subsequently the pub is now opened and working. They have the facilities to produce music and sound, which they do, which is not polluting in any way. The pub itself is controlled. I'm sure they've got health and safety conditions in operation there. And that would seem to be the obvious place to allow any expansion in that area. And even if it's not the pub, we're in a building here now which holds musical events of various kinds, which don't intrude at all, and we live bang opposite here. And there's been no problem at all when the music is organised properly, and again, under controlled conditions. I cannot understand why there's a request to have that condition removed. Doesn't make any sense, unless there is an ulterior motive.
Okay, question for me, I haven't got my mind around why the music at the pub, which is definitely amplified, is all right,
Yeah.
and music here, which could be amplified, is all right, but the music at the sports club definitely wouldn't be. I
Shouldn't
haven't
you?
understood the
Quite
distinction,
Very simple.
but we don't
When
know
there's
the sports club.
when there's been music at the pub, you can hear it from. I've got to speak from where we live.
Sure.
You can hear it very faintly, but it's not obtrusive
You're
at all.
further away for sure.
Yeah. But similarly here, there have been various parties or weddings or whatever, and
I would
And
support
from
that view, is that quite frankly, from where I live, you can hear noise, okay, on those two
Okay.
occasions, right,
All right.
which you don't hear from the pub.
But the whole point, surely, is the why is amplification applied for? Why? That's the why is the question.
No idea. Okay. And you have an extra question from me. You've mentioned the trustee document.
Yes.
Well, I've read that a few times and I don't recall seeing it in there. You're
It's
saying
in
that
there.
it is in there.
It's in there.
I can look when I get home, but I didn't bring it with me.
I should.
May I just make a point? On the application form, as you say, it said Wittersham Recreation Grant. So I contacted Ashford and I said that was incorrect and that it was the Wittersham Sports Ground, which is actually on the application form.
Yeah.
They have now changed it slightly. It's now changed to Wittersham Sports Field on their site.
I've
So-
also spoken to other members of the street and family, so I know actually.
Oh, you do? Yes,
yeah,
as I say,
I know
I
all
do.
the background.
I
And
did
there are
point it
other
out.
members that aren't here tonight that also feel the same way as us. They'll duly put their applications in.
Okay.
I
Miriam.
can clarify that point. The problem is that in 1993 it was indeed called the Wittersham Recreation Ground at the request of the Charity Commission, because at that point sports clubs couldn't have charitable status in their own right as such, so it was under the Recreation Act that the charitable trust was supposedly set up. I'm not sure whether that was actually right, but it actually was the Charity Commission who insisted on the name Wittersham Recreation Ground. Mr Mallet was very unhappy with that. It was a sports ground, the trust was clear, it was for sport, and he absolutely insisted that the name was changed back to Wittersham Sports Ground. So in 1993, the application was put in the name of Wittersham Recreation Ground, and because this application relates to that application, you were meant to have the same address as it had then. But Ashford, I understand, have conceded that it's causing confusion and they're happy for it to be called Wittersham Sports Ground. So that clears up that point.
Thank you.
One other point, I think, in terms of the question about noise travelling from the sports ground, it's certainly true that without amplification, all around the village you can actually hear when the sport is going on. The sound does really travel from that open terrain. which is rather different, I think. I mean, you can certainly hear the bands at the pub, but not to the extent that the sound travels from the sports ground itself. So I think that is a valid point.
Thank you. Very helpful.
Can I just make another point as well? If the intention of this removing the condition is to expand the facilities into parties or drinking or whatever, I understood that the village was behind the opening of the pub, and if the pub has competition in effect from there, I cannot see how the pub's going to survive, because they're on two different cost levels.
I don't think you'll find that's a planning consideration. And it's not a licensing consideration for sure. Licensing does not take account, it's only got under the Licensing Act very limited reasons for objecting, and competition isn't one of them. Okay, let's move on because we're running out of time.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, can councillors ask questions?
Of course, please.
I have a couple of questions. The first one is that it seems to be confusion of why the application is there in the first place, and don't look at me, I haven't got a clue. But given it's coming from the sports ground, Miriam, do you know why this has been applied?
Well, I don't think I'm in a position to answer the question because I haven't got any authority to speak on behalf of the sports club on this. I'm here as a private individual. Yes, I do know, but I do not think it's my permission to say, and that my views might be at variance with the majority view on this point. So it's not very fair to answer the question.
Okay,
I'm disappointed that
no one seems to know why.
Nobody's come to actually answer the question, but I mean, I don't think it's my position.
Fair enough, completely understand that. Second thing is that I was unaware of this too from the original documentation. I don't recall it. I'm not saying it's not there, but I don't recall it. But just to clarify, amplified sound, not to split hairs, but presumably that would also include village fetes announcements, music played at village fetes, sports festivals, football, cricket festivals where, or games festivals where announcements are made. So the point you're making is every amplified sound should be banned.
That's a ridiculous thing to say. No, it's not that at all.
I'm just trying to understand what with respect, I don't think my view is ridiculous.
No,
I'm just
I
trying
don't
to
say
ask.
your view is ridiculous. The comment was ridiculous because you're not banning all amplified sound, are you?
I'm sorry. Let's just cut that down. The condition, which I guess, strictly speaking, they have tended to bend or break at times, is for no amplified sound. And I mean, in a way, the only way that the point you made, I think, Alison, works is to say, well, if it's for something like what Paul just suggested, we won't complain, but if it's for something else, we will. But the condition is for seemingly no amplified sound. The actual condition, let me just add, is no longer on the public record. I went to look at the 93 application. I mean, Miriam may have a copy in her file, I don't know. But the actual public record, as unfortunately Ashford does now, has had everything stripped off it except the decision that they were allowed to build the pavilion. And the implication is that that condition exists, but it's not listed. We can't see what the condition says.
You can just ask Ashford. They don't actually, I think it's any application before 2003 and not on the website, but just ask the planning help and they'll send you a copy of it. And if you want, I can send you a copy if the parish council would like a copy, but it's there in black and white on the 93 condition. To be honest, I was shocked myself to find that condition about 5 years ago, because it had been breached by myself many times at football tournaments with amplified sound. I had no idea it was there. The football club had actually just invested in a new system. Someone had kindly bought us, and the minute we got it, we couldn't use it anymore. So the football club haven't breached it since. It is awkward in some respects, I will say, but we've respected it. I think more of the concern with the neighbours, at least that have spoken to me, is with the music, rather than, you know, somebody announcing the teams as they come out at the cup final, you know, once a year.
Okay.
But yeah, I
Good
mean,
point.
as you read it, it definitely reads as
Okay, thank you.
no music, whether it's amplified or not, and no other amplified sound. So it's basically no music and no other amplified
Thanks,
sound.
Miriam. Thank you. That's helpful. Next
Can
one.
I just make
Yes,
one small
please.
point of information, Chairman? I live up Stocks Road, going towards Rye, and I can attest that when the pub plays music, probably outside because it was in the summer, it was very clearly heard in
Up at
garden.
Acton Lane.
It was Acton Lane. So maybe not in the street, but for whatever reason, it travels across the fields.
Okay. Next one is Anchor Barn, Peening Quarter. Is anyone hoping to speak to that? A freestanding wood burner. That's a listed building application, so it's generally of pretty limited interest to anyone who doesn't live in Anchor Barn. No? No? No. And the last one is Pine View, Peening Quarter Road, which I think is you.
That's me.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Mr. Scout. Unfortunately, my wife couldn't be here tonight. She's in hospital with my daughter, who's got, well, she's basically popped her wrist out. I didn't know whether I needed to come tonight about the plan application, but just to let you know that we have spoken to all of our immediate neighbours, which they respond to for us on the call, and they've got no objections to what we're doing. Showed them all the plans of what we're going to do, and they're quite happy. But if there's any questions, then...
Okay, thank you. I would suggest, I'm sort of jumping ahead now to when we had our consideration in the meeting. I looked at that drawing of yours, and thank you for doing ones that were quite easy to understand with the little thumbnails and that. There is one of the dormer windows, the new one on the east side, broadly speaking, which looks in the direction of the back gardens, sort of your next neighbour, the middle one of the houses. You've got...
Which dorm was that?
It's the one next to one that's already there, I think.
Right, okay.
That second one heads off in the direction of the back garden of the next neighbour. I think, just as advice, we, the councillors, may suggest that the Ashford need to think about that.
Can I just say
And
that
therefore,
dorm window is actually a bathroom window,
Okay.
so it would be completely
helpful,
frosted.
which I don't think it was there. But I would also suggest, I mean, if your plan shows it's a bathroom window, that's helpful,
Yeah,
because
it
it'll be
does, yeah.
obscured. Okay, and I didn't spot that. Otherwise, I was going to say it would be useful for your neighbour to write a supportive comment on the website.
Right, okay.
You know, just to say we're happy with it, because it is something that does pop up. The others I noticed, because they're going front and side,
Yep.
don't go anywhere except that one.
Yep.
Okay? But thank you for your comment otherwise. Anyone else want to? No? And does anyone else on the public side want to say anything about anything else on the agenda? No? Right, that's excellent then. Thank you very much. So I'll now close the public session. You're all welcome to stay. You don't have to stay, but you're welcome to, but you can't take any part in the council meeting for those who are not usually here. Right, so the minutes of the last meeting, which I've now managed to lose. Here we are. Does anyone have any comments on the... Right, Nicholas.
Thank you very much
Yeah.
indeed.
And
Paul, I'm
Alison
sorry.
and Alan.
I apologise.
Go on. Okay.
Just very
Accepted.
about it.
Understood.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, all of you.
Torch.
Oh, gosh, yes, we'll fall over the... It's quite dark out there. Bless you. Thank you.
Right. Yes, the minutes. Did anyone have any concerns with them, comments, whatever? Or can I sign them? Right, that's done. So, on to matters arising. The planting of the Platinum Jubilee Oak. Some of you, or maybe all of you, were there on the 4th of August when...
September.
September, was it?
Yes.
How did I put August? Bishop Rose, the Bishop of Dover, kindly came along and planted the oak with due ceremony and prayers. And although it looked a bit wan at the time, I have heard word that the buds are coming for next year.
Yes.
So fingers crossed, we may have a nice oak in time. We hope.
It's sprouting.
The what?
It's sprouting.
Yeah, good. Next one is the ewe and lamb sign. The renaissance, or even the resurrection of our old and very sad pub sign was masterminded, and the artwork was restored by Kate Miller, assisted by Greg Penoyer's carpentry, Paul Stern's ironwork, Sid Barrett's muscle, Alf Mather's work on the steel ground support, and Tim Piper, who brought his very essential piece of heavy plant over to do the high lift of the sign up into place, and it all went really well in the rain last week. Was it last week?
Looks very good.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah.
It's been a lot. It's a brilliant job. It's been greatly welcomed by residents on next door. I would like to offer the council's grateful thanks to everyone who helped carry it out, especially Kate and Greg, who did the majority of the planning and the execution.
Yeah.
And although we didn't sort of start off thinking this, Kate is actually an art restorer, so she had there wasn't much to restore, by the way, but she has painted the same picture, if you like, of the ewe and lamb. You can actually see it's a ewe and lamb now, rather than a large sort of white cloud.
Yeah, it looks very good.
So it does, yes, and I'm delighted that that went really well. And thanks very much to everyone who helped.
Nice to have a success.
Indeed. Nice to have something done, actually, after 2 years and counting when not much did get done. And of course it is, as people used to point out to me, it is the name of the bus stop, even though the pub's not there anymore. But it looks really grand. Right, the Commonwealth Waterways Commission is for you. Go on.
Could I just
Please.
add
Yes,
to that, please, just to say that we've now had a request for the balance of £242.41 for sort of incidentals, the box, metal paints, washers, rust-proofed in paint for all time, all that sort of thing, which
everything except the post, really.
The total we spent so far is £534.13. That was for the post and the hire of the scaffold. So with that and that, we had a budget of £950, so that's within it. So it's worked out well.
Good.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I mean, what's actually useful as well to remind ourselves is that although the post came in quite well, we gave a contingency, and when you add up all the odds and ends, the scaffolding actually was a significant bit which they found they needed. That was to take the old one down, and then Tim lifted the new one up in one go. Right.
I do have a video on my phone if anybody wants to see it. Again.
Maybe just send it to KCC to remind them it's the best looking bus stop for school children's buses in the county.
Right.
Okay, Commonwealth Waterways Commission. I managed to get hold of Rob Watson, who was very helpful. He went straight, because he's obviously got the straight contacts. So this is what we'll be having. And because we're a parish council, they don't need to come and fix it. So Alf will be able to. They'll be sending it to me, so Alf will be able to fix it.
Super.
Good. Okay, excellent. That's a loose end getting tied up after a long time. I imagine, but you told me, Eva, that's something that Dave Fletcher is well on top of as well.
Yes, he was.
All about it, because he's the one who's really pressed the thing all the time about that war grave. Good. Next one then is the PROW 8080.
Yes, that was following Paul's question at the last meeting. And so I contacted Ashford, and the diversion application is in
Kent.
place. Sorry, Kent, you're right, Casey said. Yes, the diversion application is in place, but it's way down on the list, so that's not going to happen very soon. And obviously that footpath goes right the way through to the road to Rovenden Lane, comes out of Cuckoo Cottage. You can't actually get through there either at the moment. That's been like that for a long time. And that is still waiting to be allocated to an officer. So I'm afraid,
For enforcement,
no, to be looked at.
to look.
Yes, to investigate, to find out. But it's a big problem there.
Okay.
So that footpath is a bit...
Cuckoo Cottage is the riding estate.
Yes.
Yes.
It's been like that for
A
several
long,
years.
long time. Yes. I reported it years ago.
Yeah, I mean, my view on that is that whilst one can understand the resources and they've got a long list, etc., but to go year after year after year and it not even be allocated, you know, to use the old-fashioned phrase, the buck's got to stop somewhere. And I wonder if it's time, it seems maybe a bit over the top, but I wonder if it's a time for Mike to be advised of that as the county councillor, because I just feel that we're not getting anywhere with Ashford, or even if we formally want with Kent. Sorry, it's Kent. So maybe we should consider at some stage formally putting that to Mike, because we're in his patch.
Perhaps you could do
You know,
that.
Because otherwise we're going to be talking about this in a year's time.
No,
There's nothing done.
councillors were concerned that, blah, blah, blah.
And there have been incidents in the past. I do know that, you know, that there were a couple of incidents where, how can I put it, the size of the dogs that lived there were fairly intimidating for some of the walkers who wanted to get through, to the extent they felt they couldn't proceed.
No,
and that's unfair.
You get into a paddock. There's a gate that takes you into a paddock, and then there's no way out.
Yeah.
You know, it's just ridiculous.
Well, that should be dealt with. Am I right in thinking, just to confirm, that a POW that's been registered can never be extinguished without a legal process? So however long they lock it up, it doesn't disappear
No,
because it
right.
wasn't used. It has to be reopened.
Because I think people sometimes are under the misunderstanding that if it's not used after a period of time, it becomes defunct. And that isn't the case.
It's the opposite is true.
Yeah.
If you use it long enough, you can apply to register it, but you can't get rid of it. They're the very devil to get rid of or move. It can be done, but it's a whole legal process. Okay. Good. So now the planning applications. The first one is the land south of 63 the street. We've heard Nicholas's point about it being a strange place, but I don't think the motivation of the buyer is an issue for planning.
So Simon Hoskins has sold it to Mr. Martin Nunn, who used to live in the village.
Yes.
And he has come along to the July meeting and explained to us when hardly anyone was here that they live in Tenterden, but they wanted to keep a horse somewhere. This was a place he could do it. And the point about whether it's to become a house later, which of course we can't say would never happen, but it would need planning permission. He is very happy for the current application to be conditioned that it can't be. Doesn't mean to say a condition can't be varied, but it's an extra little hurdle. And he's also put in a note himself on the application to say that he definitely intends it only to be for a horse. Now, you know, we can all be, you know, as conspiratorial as we wish, but the fact is there's an application for stables and a barn on a piece of land that's quite big. I can't judge whether he's sensible doing it there or not, frankly. But it seems to me that horses and countryside are not strange bedfellows. It isn't. What it isn't, of course, is a field in the middle of nowhere. It is apt to be a field right next door to a house. But then the whole planning history of this field is it's been this, that and the other. And it did get turned down for a house, which of course we, I think, supported.
Indeed.
I did forward, if you remember, the email from Mr. Lund. who's right next door, obviously.
Yeah.
And his position, from what I can remember, was that he wasn't objecting to the stables as such. It was just the thought that it could become a house was his worry.
I think that was a concern for a number of people, but I think Jeremy's point that it would have to go through a really hefty process of conversion, and I think it's unlikely to get it.
Well, having had one house turned down,
Yes,
you've been through this yourself in your family, that if it's got negatives, it's harder. It's never impossible. It's harder to overturn.
of course. I would support the application.
Okay.
Well, across the road from me, diagonally across, is a small paddock on which a lady comes every day to look after her horses. I don't know where she comes from, but she's certainly not a neighbour. I think a lot of people have to keep their horses away from where they live.
I think
They're
she
not-
lives in Wittersham, but she's a good mile, half a mile away, so...
Not everyone's fortunate enough to have land adjacent to their house that they can keep their horses, and I don't think...
So you could.
Certainly thought about donkeys, not horses. No, but I mean, I don't think one should discourage the keeping of horses and riding this part of the country
Yeah.
life, as I understand it.
I would agree with you.
I don't,
at this
I,
stage.
I don't object.
And especially having heard the neighbour comment today, and the adjustment of the barn to a smaller usage, I wouldn't have any objection at this stage.
So I think probably, and I go with the others, I just think that it's very odd to say you can't keep a horse in the countryside, unless you've got obvious reasons. I understand the points that have been made by others in the comments, other residents that say, well, it's an Airbnb, you can't this, that and the other. Can you build a barn and what have you? Well, we've got barns all over the place for farming, and they're much, much bigger. Everything's balanced in planning. But I would go with the idea that it is hard to resist, the idea that they should be able to do it. But I think that we do re-emphasise again that we are talking about the horse and the stables and the barn. We're not talking about it being converted or whatever. And that we welcome the fact that the barn's been made smaller. The barn itself is not that big. I think it's 8 yards by 8 yards by about 14 foot high to the ridge, which is not much at all.
According to Mr. Nunn, the planning officer is happy with the size of the barn.
Yeah. So I think we can support it making those sort of caveats.
Yes, I think it is worth making those comments.
Yeah.
To
And of
insert
course,
it.
the thing is the planning officer will read the people's comments who are against it, and there are a number on there
Yes.
who don't want it for various reasons. Planning, AONB and all the rest. I did, just as a little aside, I thought somewhere I found a comment about the Ashford having a policy on horses in the countryside, and AONB and what have you. I did look it up at the time, that policy. It's an old one. So far as I can tell, and nothing's ever definite in these things, it's not been actually abolished by the new plan that's come in since, the 2030 plan, which has got a huge list of policies that have been abolished, and it's not one of them. But, and I did check this with Ashford, an old policy can only carry on if there's a policy in the new plan that refers to it, or refers to what it's about. And I can't find any policies in the new plan that are very close to it. There's maybe a loose connection. And I'm told by someone in a position to know, very senior in his work in Ashford, that says, well, there are shades of grey, but if you can't point to a policy in the plan that is pretty clearly pointing to an old policy, then it gets weaker and weaker according to, So I think that wherever it's buried in the system, I think that doesn't count for much. But that's again for the planning officer. If they feel that they should apply it in some way, they can obviously do that. Okay, that's land sample 63 Street. Thanks. Now the next one is Wittersham Sports Ground and the condition
May I read out, please, at this point?
Please,
Right, this is,
sent to you.
yes, this came at the request that I read them out at the meeting. This is from Mary Bolton. I object most strongly to this application to remove condition 2, amplified sound, from planning permission 93/00769 AS. It was a necessary condition in 1993 when the pavilion was built and is every bit as necessary now. There are residents nearby who are elderly, people who have young children, people who are unwell, people with exams on the following day, people who have to work on a Sunday, need a siesta or simply an undisturbed night's sleep. I suggest that a vote to remove this condition would show a quite breathtaking lack of consideration for the well-being of fellow villagers. It's Mary's, and this is Gillian Kirk's. This condition was put in place when the sports field was gifted to the village to be used purely as a sports field. It was specified to safeguard the peace and quiet of a small village and the residents. To introduce the facility for the sports club to use amplified sound equipment is going to majorly disrupt those households surrounding the sports field. At present, the sounds of the sports taking place on the sports field are very clearly audible across the fields, which is very enjoyable and lovely to hear people having fun. The intrusion of amplified sound, on the other hand, is going to significantly adversely impact those residents within earshot. I understand a wedding took place on the sports field during the summer. We were mercifully away at the time, and the music played almost until midnight, disturbed many residents. If this is a precursor of things to come, I'm totally against condition 2 being removed. Amplified sound in this context is sound pollution at its worst. I'm also aware that many households within earshot of the sports field have not received notification from Ashford Borough Council of this proposal, and I think it is entirely wrong for the Parish Council to make a decision on the removal of Clause 2 before all those people who are likely to be impacted by excessive noise have been notified and been able to make their views known. If there is a vote by the Parish Council on this application, I trust you will seriously consider the adverse impact excessive sound will do to a quiet rural village. I expect you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Well, there were 48 people notified apparently.
Indeed, and I don't think Ashford has a statutory obligation, they're all non-statutory, so while good practice says that they should try and pick up what they feel they should, 48's being quite generous. But I don't think it doesn't represent a bar on it being decided by Ashford, let alone by us, whether they did it or didn't do particular people. We know second-hand, but I think as far as I know it's true. I mean, I haven't gone to look at a licensing application that the pub has got a licence for amplified sound. They've certainly been using it. The first time I heard them with the group playing outside during the summer, I was quite surprised, and I thought, blimey, there are going to be complaints about this. I have not heard of any complaints. I'm not saying there haven't been any, but I've not heard a word. And
Heard complaints it wasn't a very good band.
that's a different thing. Yeah, well, they get what they get. They have been quite reasonable about not going on very late. I think they've been sensible about that. And I can imagine, I don't know how this will be dealt with, whether it go to licensing because it's licensed premises, as well as planning. Obviously it's a planning condition, but licensing is involved. And as I said earlier, my understanding about it actually, and I've looked at this before, the actual licensing issue, competition is not a point, which Alison raised. With the pub having a licence, and I'm told, again I haven't gone to read this, and there have been no complaints, that it does include out external as well as internal. They've now moved internal this Sunday because it's been cold, but before that it was on the terrace each Sunday night. It'll be for planning, it'll be for perhaps the licensing to decide. I would have thought it was not unreasonable for it to have a time limit. and whether
Yes.
that is midnight. I think the pubs goes to midnight or even later.
Well, I think this is quite a few people in Poplar Road have expressed concern.
Yes.
Not necessarily that it should stay at the present time, but the question of how often
Yeah, sure.
and at what time.
And it's an anxiety, isn't it?
And I think that was the rationale. Yeah, if it was to be on a regular basis,
Yeah.
I think that there would be far stronger objections from people who have spoken to me, and quite a few in the last week or so. The other question I always basically is, as the Sports and Social Club consulted the owner
Of the ground.
of the
yes.
ground.
Sure. It's an interesting point. It's not a point for the planning stroke licensing,
No.
of course, but you're right, it could be an issue as far as their lease is concerned.
That's right.
Depending on what that says, and if the lease is part of the trustee, and as I said earlier, I don't recall, I can check when I get home, I don't recall there being a condition in there. But again, it applies in a different, these are all parallels.
Yes.
I mean, just because they got planning permission to say they could do it doesn't mean to say they can if the landlord says no. And if just because the landlord says yes doesn't mean to say they can if the planning says no.
But you're trying to cover all bases, aren't you?
And we don't have to in a way.
No, we don't have to, but you know, the knock-on effect
Yeah.
could be interesting.
Sure.
And I think that's my concern on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I echo that. I just think that, I mean, there's obviously a reason behind why this is being applied for. We don't know what that is. I mean, to me, it's either a sports and social club looking at potential additional revenue streams to raise money to plough back into the facility. Of course, 1993 is 29 years ago, and the whole issue of where marriages took place and weddings and what have you was a very different time in those days. And so, to a certain extent, this might reflect what's going on now. I find the condition nonsensical, personally, because that's why I raised the point, not to antagonise, but just to broaden the issue, because to me, on the banned list would then be children's parties, sports field announcements, competitions, you know, anything. You know, you can't have sort of, well, we'll have a maypole dance with some amplified music, or the Lindsay Hopper's coming. Oh, no. And it looks like a real mess as applied to today, and I can understand when it first came out. So, from the perspective of, and if you took a vote in the village, it might go the other way. You know, there might be sufficient people who saw the benefits of that rather than the negativity. And we are living in the context of the pub. I mean, I heard the music from the pub where I live, which is sort of the same way. Most of the music the night of the party. Yeah, well, practically, I clearly haven't got any rights to have a horse where I am, but that's a different issue.
You have got the field.
I have got the field, but sadly no horse, and that's the way it's going to stay. So I think the main thing here is about how it's reflecting what people want in the village in a broader sense and the purpose of it. But I for one, would be highly supportive of a time limit. I think that, you know, if the pub has till 12 o'clock, I would think fair dues, then the same thing for the sports club. And I guess they may have to apply for the similar licensing requirements for public entertainment, which is a slightly different angle.
Sure.
So
I think perhaps then,
it's a difficult one.
perhaps the answer here is that at the moment, as far as we know, they are not officially allowed to do any amplified sound, which is a problem because, you know, oh sorry, Alan,
Yes.
beg your
I
pardon.
haven't had a chance yet.
I beg your pardon. Please stop.
I mean, Wittersham's a conservative place, and when I'm living, I know it's out of the village and down at Potman's Heath. I do hear music from, you know, weddings and parties, and for instance, I could hear the Buds Lane party loud and clear from where I am. And I must say, it gives me a certain amount of pleasure to think that people are having fun, and I think, well, you know, I rather wish I'd been invited, but I mean, I think, why not let them have fun? I can't see Wittersham in our current society exploiting this. I can't see that we're going to have a permanent festival Monday to Sunday of loud music. And I mean, we've got the church bells. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
you get some villages where they complain about the church bells. You know,
Just why?
isn't it? It's lovely to hear. And you know, and I think, I mean, as you know, I'm president of the cricket club, and I haven't been involved in discussions about this, but they do need to make a revenue, and they do need to try and, you know, make their end meet. And I mean, I suppose a time limit's okay, but to be honest, when I live out in the village, but if every now and again, you know, 3 or 4 times a year, some music went on to 2 o'clock in the morning, actually I would find it quite refreshing. I would actually encourage it. I think it would be a jolly good thing, and a jolly good thing for the spirit of the village.
Oh.
And
So the place was alive.
I mean, all right, I mean, you know, if it turned into a riot or a rampage, then so be it.
You don't want Glastonbury
I
then.
don't see that that's going to happen in the
Okay.
future.
I
So
think-
I would basically, I support them.
I think where it seems to come, thanks Alan, I think where it seems to come to is that at the moment we have a situation that is kind of bizarre, because as Miriam said earlier, you know, there were things that are entirely reasonable that were being stopped because they weren't legally allowed. On the other hand, there is an anxiety that we don't really want the sort of what was his name? Noriega in Panama. The Americans got rid of Noriega by playing pop songs at him for 120 decibels, 24 hours a day until he went away. We don't want that either. So perhaps what we're looking at, subject to you guys agreeing, is that we think that the condition should be removed, but the replacement could have certain, let's call it, limits on it. So, I mean, I doubt that they would want to just say, oh, there's no, you know, the limitation doesn't, because of the licensing. So it needs to be replaced with one that has got more nuance in it, on timing, on circumstances, on number of days a week or year or whatever, so that they get a reasonable opportunity not to be abused, but not to be, oh, you mustn't do anything. And you know, having weddings occasionally, which I suspect would, you know, maybe 10 o'clock or something, PM, you know, they'd like to go on later probably, but, you know, at least, and that's really for Ashford to decide, because they've got a licensing team who work with that all over the place. And after all, if there's some venue in the middle of Ashford, it's got more people around it than we have.
And most of the late night, occasional late night music, as Alan mentioned, is private houses.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, that's true as well. And the pub. But, well, the pub's not going late, that's the other thing.
We hope the pub is going to survive. We all do.
Indeed we do.
I mean, we don't have a guarantee of that.
No, not at all. Not at all. Okay, is that something we can find some words for? Good. Okay, let's move on. We then go to Anchor Barn, which is a proposed installation of the freestanding wood burner with metal flue, which is indoors. It's only here because of it being a listed building. My personal view is that this is silliness, really. I mean, it's why on earth we need to fuss this much, I don't know. When it was listed originally, it was not the house, it was Anchor Barn, I think. You know, it's had far more violence done to it than putting a wood burning stove in. Does anyone have any problems with it?
No.
No. Good. And last one, plain view for Mr. Trout. The insertion of 4 new dormer windows into the existing first floor rooms. Does anyone have any concerns about that?
No.
My only question was next door, Cambria, and
Yeah.
John satisfied me with the fact he's talked to neighbours and they're fine, so no objections at all, I support it.
So I think that we put in our usual formula, which is to say that we think it's all right, that we support it so long as the neighbours are satisfied or something like that. And then Mr. Shout does what I suggested.
Okay.
Good. That's all the planning then. So now we move on.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming as well. So KCC reciting of the library ban in Forge Meads, that's correspondence.
Yes, if you remember, we asked whether they would look at other places, Forge Meads being the one suggested, and they agreed, yes. So that's where it is now, just
Good.
inside Forge Meads.
Yeah.
I
Are
put a
they
piece.
getting more people, do you know?
I don't know, because the last time I spoke to Mavis, it had been, they hadn't got a driver, so it didn't actually turn out.
I think it's a shame it's
However-
not down at the pub, but anyway, it's up to them. It's their choice.
Yeah.
However, I mean, I did put a piece on next door, and I put a piece in the Outlook.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
So,
Okay, it's done. Setting up the Speedwatch group, Martin Chambers.
yes, we had this letter, well, email from him asking for support. He has basically set it up himself and has his email. He is the organiser. Yes.
What does that mean?
He was the first to join. I'm the nominated coordinator, but I do not think it means anything other than welcome new members. Also, it should be a village effort. He's done the online training course and the quiz. All new members need to go through this before they can join. All members will then need hands-on training to operate the kit. I replied that yes, that we had seen, because he put it on next door, didn't he? So I don't know how much response he got. And I said that we'd be quite supportive, because we've said that in the past, anybody doing this would be quite supportive, and that if they need help with tabards or something like that, I'm sure we will
Yes, we
consider
definitely support it.
supporting
Yeah, financially.
anything like that as well. So, but I haven't actually heard any more since.
No.
Does anyone else?
No, I haven't. No.
No, I haven't. Okay, well, let's correspondence, and we've noted that, and we wait to see how it develops. PKF Little John, the completion of the audit. I believe you got a
I have.
gold star again.
Well, I got the piece of paper that says no comments.
That's a
Pass
gold
the gold
star.
star.
Long may it continue.
Yeah, she got away with it again.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, that's your specialist subject. Should be all right.
Oh, no comment.
No, doing the books. Doing, I said.
Yes.
Yeah, good. Anyway, I mean, every year that's, and you've had to go through the notice quiz and stuff like that.
Yes, yes, that's
all
all.
that's done. Did everyone come?
No.
No, right. The Rotary Club attended it, offering us some crocus bowls.
Yes, you remember a few years ago we were
Yes,
offered it.
yeah.
It's all to do with the polio. They're trying to eradicate polio, and they have purple crocuses because it's the dye that's put on the children's fingers that are have been vaccinated against it, and it's their 75th, the Tenterton's 75th anniversary this year.
Yeah.
So they wanted to sort of do it all over again, and in a bit of a bigger way, because I'm not sure how many we had last time. We've got 150 now. And so the invite came out for one of us to go and represent the village. Well, I suggested that perhaps Alf might like to, because he's the one that plants them. So he went along. He was a bit upset, no vol-au-vents, but I think there were some nibbly bits and a glass of wine. And the little chap has had. So he's suggesting putting them round the walnut tree on the memorial garden and the boulder
Yes.
that's up there
That's
as well.
that's a very good position.
And also on the boulder round one that's on the
Sure,
village
yeah.
green.
Well, that's good, actually. Makes
Yeah.
more of that one.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's what.
Yeah.
While we talk, just this is just a complete aside. While we're talking about the village green, because Poplar Farm got kicked out of the park. I haven't done it yet, but I'm minded to go back again to Ashford to say, can you sort yourselves out and tell us whether you will give us the village green? The village
Yes.
green. I mean, all I ever asked for a year ago of the chief executive was,
Yes, sir.
in principle,
Yes.
so they gave it to the lawyers who've promptly, put it under the nearest filing cabinet and left it there. And I have chased it 6 months ago as well. But if they were thinking about building, and they really are pretty screwed now. I mean, the village green could never be built on anyway, so that really didn't matter. And now they can't do anything on old S61. I mean, they had a planning. Simon said to me that knocks it out for years. Everything can come back, but it knocks it out for years. And I'm not asking. That's not Ashford's anyway. That piece, we're not asking for anything that ought to be a problem. But if we can get hold of the village green, it enables us to then do more. There's Miriam's plan years ago, which died, of the pond, which I'd like to still see tidied up. And there's doing more with the village green, which is really a disgrace, actually. It's in very poor shape, and nothing will be done about it. I would like to move the play area to it.
What can we do to push it along?
Well, I think I get on to the chief executive again and say, come on. And failing that, talk to councillors. I mean, it should be an administrative thing, not a councillor's thing. But
I think you could ask her could you have a meeting with her rather than correspondence.
in fact, the word is that she's going to come to the next CALC meeting. We have the head of place, space and leisure this time. If she comes next time and you come to CALC, you can nag her yourself as well.
I will come.
November. She may always call off, but the word was from the director of place, space and leisure, place, space and face, that she would be coming next time.
She has been moving around quite a bit recently.
I mean, they're busy. We should acknowledge all of that, but really, that's something that. Anyway, I just mentioned that because we're talking about the focuses there.
As part of the campaign to get where we want to get, maybe just it's a long way off, but maybe we extend an invitation now, so we're getting a diary for the annual parish meeting. And one of the things that we'll be looking forward to hearing her plans for the village green, etc., etc., etc. That might galvanise her into wanting to make some sort of activity before the date. I mean, it's a long way. It's 6-8 months away.
To be fair to Tracy Curley, she's very amenable.
She
Very
is.
amenable individual. There are some that you wouldn't really want to, but she's fine.
Well, if we just flag up, we'd like to invite her, and by the way, this is already on the agenda, and we want to give you plenty of time to
I
consider
invite
your
her at
action.
the next CALC meeting then.
Well, she is supposed to become. What's happened is that when she came to our CALC meeting about a year and a bit ago, which was online, after I'd had a one-to-one on Teams with her for an hour, she said that she would like officers to come to CALC. Now, actually, we are in it's not in two minds. It is good that officers come to CALC, but we don't want officers there all the time, because it's a kind of bit of a little trade union as well. But now it's changed again because the civic centre, they've stopped the janitors staying on so late. So either senior officers have to come with the keys, or they have to pay for a janitor. And at the moment, the senior officers who don't get paid are topping it.
Wasn't it with Mark James?
It's with Mark James last, but I wouldn't change. But I changed. Last time I went to Tracy Curley 6 months ago and said what's happening, and it percolated down to Mark James, who apologised profusely and said it was with the lawyers, and he chased them again. He's got to start off at the chief executive again. And I can, of course, hinge it on the fact that the housing has just been turned down. Not that it's directly related, but it's proximate. Anyway, that was just an aside, since we were talking about the boulder which Miriam and Mavis very kindly arranged years ago, and there's the pond hanging out. We've got to do more about that. It's not good enough, in my opinion. Caretaker.
We've renewed the contract with ABC, and I'll be invoicing them shortly for their annual contribution.
Right. Good. Finance, the monthly transaction statements.
We had a few of them, I'm afraid, because obviously you didn't get July. You didn't get July and August at the last meeting, so you got July, August and September.
As usual, we get two for each month, but the caretaker one, which is important for Yvonne, is really just a subset of the other one. Is everyone happy with the July?
We've had the precept.
Indeed.
And that was July. I don't think there was anything.
Is everyone happy with August?
Yes.
And is everyone happy with September?
Yes.
Yeah.
One question, I assume it's going to pop up in October. Didn't you tell me that there's a refund because of local,
Yes.
what's it, for
Yes.
that burial?
Yes.
So there's going to be a deduction from the expensive burial, goes back out in the following month. Right, so
Do you want to-
can I sign all of these then?
Yes, you started me.
However you want me to do it. Could be doing checks.
Those are the days, eh?
When you were getting Fuggles paying into the bank, you picked Lloyd's for them, did you, rather than giving you checks?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, Fuggles went into the...
One of them went into Lloyd's. There was something going into Lloyd's, I saw.
Yeah.
That's it, I think.
But Fuggles, the reason why I did. Yes, that's because it was a check. Yes, it was a check. Sorry. Yeah. No, that was... Fuggles was...
Okay, they're all done. So that's the transaction. That's transaction statements. Then the next thing is the
budget statement.
Budget statement, which
I think is...
we've got, which is this one that comes straight off the computer. To be fair, it's not terribly meaningful at the minute until Yvonne, which I think you're going to try and do next year, is split the things up.
No, it doesn't come up. I've done that and it doesn't
Doesn't
it
make
out.
any
No.
difference.
No, what I do find slightly annoying is the fact that obviously under the where it's got the variances and the
Well, that's
gives you
why I'm
the
thinking
difference.
of it.
Because yes, but it gives you receipts and obviously half of them, most of them aren't receipts, so it just gives you zero, which don't really want it there. You know, it's not necessary. It just
There might be a
It's
tweak there or
confusing.
a slightly different presentation somewhere in the menus, but
whereas the others, you know, when you see it, they're quite clear.
the thing is that let's take donations as an example. Donations or grants given, budget 600, actual 350, there it's 250, but the 350 is for 6 months and the 600 was for the year. And in any normal accounting system, computerised accounting system in a company, it will allow you to calendarise it. So that if you put in £50 a month for the donations, it's not that you won't go over or under in an individual month, but it does show you that you're kind of going with the year rather than...
Year-to-date column.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I strongly suspect that's in there somewhere.
Just that this is how it was, you know.
Yeah.
This goes on from what I used to produce manually before.
Indeed, and the benefit now is that the computer will do the donkey work if you do that. I think that's maybe, if necessary, something to discuss with Scribe when you have your conference in a day or two, because I can't believe that bigger councils haven't got that sorted out, because it would be very hard for them to keep track otherwise. Okay, is everyone happy with that?
Yep.
Do you want me to sign that?
Yes. Okay.
And lastly, the clerk's expenses.
That obviously looks big because it's got the...
It's got the lasers.
Yes,
the laser
it should have been on
cartridges in.
September's, but obviously it didn't happen.
Okay. But there they are. And that sets... that, so far, the lasers only used the free ones that came with it, which are small capacity. So this sets it fair for quite a long time now.
I had a quick question. I haven't been past the end of Acton Lane for a couple of weeks, but it's got convex safety mirror.
It's got, obviously I've charged for it. So,
Yes.
Yes, the problem is that the one I ordered before that got damaged, it discontinued. So the one I've got this time doesn't have the same connection. It should go onto a pole, and obviously it's a square post up there. So Alf's got to get a different bracket so that he can put it on.
Okay.
It's with Alf. He's got it at the moment, and that's what I probably need to consider. But
Give him a weed chase.
So there's
yes, that's the problem.
Yes, no, but Yvonne actually had told me that she got it.
Right.
Okay.
We
So clerk's
are pleased about that.
expenses are all approved?
Yes.
Yep, good.
Thank you.
Decisions made since the last meeting on planning, that's decisions made by our side. There was the land south of 63, the street, the first time round the block, which Yvonne did under delegation because we were forced into that by circumstance, and it was a comment only. The quarter house at Peening Quarter, routing of the 25-metre cable, Yvonne supported that under delegation on the grounds that it was in the weeds from our point of view. I think again it's listed building. That's the only reason it's there. Decisions received. Cullen's Farm Buildings, to be clear, that is now no longer Allen's at all. It did get granted and building is underway at speed.
It's not as speedy as he would like.
All right.
His bricklayers didn't turn up.
That's not unusual. Did the bricks turn up?
I presume so.
Well, they are short. Hurst House, Budds Lane, that is Martin Chambers that we were talking about earlier. The erection of the ground-mounted photovoltaic solar array was granted. I'm delighted with the photovoltaic array, not so much with it being ground-mounted. I got on to him to ask him how he got 15.2 kilowatt export licence. He's got a three-phase supply, that's the reason.
You got what?
He's got a three-phase supply, which means you can have more or less what you want, I think.
I'm glad you told me that.
Whereas in my case, have you got three-phase?
Yes.
In my case...
I didn't know that until they came to repair something in the road that time. And then I said, why have you got three-phase? I said, well, it's probably because there was a milking parlour here. I didn't think it was a farm originally.
Just be a bit careful where different phases are.
Yes.
That can be a very dangerous shock.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm only being told, I don't know if even it's been formally granted, I'm only going to go out 8. Fine. It's a shame. Poplar Farmhouse, Whoopee, appeal dismissed, great celebrations in many quarters. Just as well, very good that a lot of residents objected, but at the same time I think, to be fair, Parish Council did a good job in our objection, and because the inspector decided, or just whatever reason, didn't criticise the road junction, because presumably Kent had approved it, he majored not only on what we said, but very much on what we had said anyway, which was the listed building and the previous inspector's decision on the plan, which he quoted. And if you haven't already, if you read the inspector's decision, it's a very clear, short definite one.
Do we know when they're going to be deciding on Stocks Road?
No.
We don't know any more about
There is,
that.
well, all I know is that meetings continue between the applicant and the planners that I believe are cordial, and
I
they
forget
are,
where we are with it. I mean, I can't even...
well, they've got to see whether they can come up with a compromise which the planners will support. If the planners will support it, then while nothing is ever definite in this world, the view of the majority of the committee seemed to be, we wouldn't mind supporting this, but we don't like to support it if the planners feel it's a bad idea, and then you're therefore told, go away, put your heads together, come up with an agreement. If of course the planners never do come up with an agreement, because they always say no, then we'll have to see what happens. I would imagine they would put it in anyway, and it's got to go back to the committee, who may grant it anyway, or may turn it down and it goes to appeal.
Thank you, John.
Otherwise, if the planners do agree it, there are antis there, but I think it probably would go through. But you never know. Okay. Open spaces.
Seen no.
Leslie's very busy with that, I can see.
Oh, I am every day.
I have.
Indeed.
You have stuff in open
I have.
spaces.
Yes.
Nobody else. Okay. Off you go.
The memorial garden, as you go inside, there's a fir tree on the left-hand side, which isn't looking very happy. I've asked after I have a look at it. He says there are some dead branches, so he's suggesting that he takes off and we see what is left and what happens.
Yeah, okay.
I've had a request from the ladies that garden up there to say that it should be taken out and replaced there with a new tree to commemorate the Queen.
Mm.
Well, I'm not sure that that's a good place.
It's not a site.
However, I have said that I would expect that perhaps, yes, we will go down that road at some point to have a tree somewhere.
It would be more likely, though, to be a tree that will become a major deciduous tree like the Churchill oak and the rest of them.
Yeah.
And
But
therefore
just not
the
there.
site has got to be careful, and we've got the same problem then with the one that we just did for the Jubilee, which is finding the right place to get it up to being able to stand up for itself.
Yeah.
But we would probably buy a more mature one to start with.
But that's how I've left.
Okay.
That.
Right. Hi guys. We've got the seminar Thursday. Yvonne and I are going to attend that. It's only online, unfortunately. I suspect that KCC are trying to avoid having physical meetings in the future, which Paul and I used to attend from time to time and harangue the officers and the cabinet member. But anyway, we'll go and see what happens.
Just can I just ask quick, just in anticipation as we approach the colder season, are we all stocked up on our gritty and salt bins in the village?
The salt, I've already I've been asked whether we would like the bag, and I have said yes. Well, I checked with Alf, and he said yes. They need topping up, so yes.
Thank you.
Okay. POWs?
Some styles, actually, the ones that I have complained about, have actually been made safer. Not wonderful, but have been made safer. Trevor and I have been out sorting out a couple of other things. I mean, obviously the ground's good at the moment, but I'm not sure into what the weather goes with into.
Did anything ever happen about doing the groundwork behind Summer? Is it Summer House? Summer whatever? Did that get done?
Yes.
Oh, good.
We're now waiting for the one to be done behind the bungalows at Jubilee Field as you go out towards Arley. We've already said we'll give some money towards that.
Okay.
But the surface is tarmacked, but the roots of the trees are coming
Oh, I
through.
remember, yes.
So they have agreed.
Go do
We're
that
just
then.
waiting for that one. Yes.
Okay. Cemetery and churchyard?
Or just to say that obviously the ground on the left-hand side down at the bottom has all been cleared and levelled. That's what all the
Very neat.
invoices was for. And I will now see that it stays that way.
Good. The CALP meeting last week that I went to, that meeting had to be rescheduled after the scheduled date was on the 8th of September. We were just getting together as the news was broadcast about the death of our late Queen. The meeting was therefore abandoned before it began, and we held it again last week. On the police side, we've got a new borough commander, presently temporary, pending a final decision. She's Chief Inspector Vanessa Foster. I don't know if we've had a female before, but we have now. She came and talked to us. She's been posted from Medway. Quite useful actually, because the problems that Ashford has more than us, you know, Medway's got them in spades, so she comes with experience of how to deal with ASB and, you know, city centre troubles and things like that, town centre troubles.
Sorry, Jeremy, do you know what happened to her predecessor?
Got promoted to superintendent. He was the man who used to be in charge of the firearms squad. And done that. I mean, they all move around and do lots of different things. I mean, if they're on the way up. A decision on the future of neighbourhood policing, that doesn't only mean our rural neighbourhoods, it means the town as well. That's awaiting confirmation from chief officers. We're told there is a reduction, we knew a reduction in PCSOs, but she said not a complete removal, although it's not been finally rubber stamped. That's thought likely. The numbers have already reduced because a number have left, seeing the way it was running, or that they've been promoted to constables if they wanted to be. There's a recruitment freeze. She said they'll still be the bedrock of neighbourhood policing, so she's confident they will keep a few. If parishes no longer have an allocated constable or PCSO, because it may be constables replace them to some degree, then they should at least have a nominated point of contact, which in a way is probably what we had before. We had a PCSO, but really it was a contact as much as anything, because she was dealing with about 15 villages. I don't know if she's back
still around.
Well, she fell off a horse,
Yeah.
so she was on sick leave for a long time, and now I don't know. I think I heard she was on restricted duties, was she?
What about
She wasn't out yet. She was in
I can't forget his name now, the young chap. Ollie, is he still around?
Yes, he came to our last. He came. To
I just
last
wonder whether or
meeting.
not he was, whether or not we have been declared a crime-free zone, or whether we should still expect some form
We don't know.
of crime report.
Oh, well, yes, but it's now every
3 months.
3 months.
2 months.
So
Every 3 months.
one would like to think.
And we
it
said
should
an
be.
attendance, not a report.
Yeah.
Report every month, attendance
Okay.
every 3, I
Yes,
think it is.
they
But
But
really, we haven't had a
Martin
report.
forwards that thing onto next door, doesn't he? Martin Chambers.
Yes, he does all that.
Is that 3 monthly or is that monthly?
Monthly, I believe.
Okay, so it's being produced,
Oh, yes.
but we're not getting it. What I'm saying is he's getting it in his neighbourhood watch capacity, but the parish council doesn't.
Should have come to us.
Yes.
I don't know if they're actually the same report, but anyway, we are supposed to be getting something, but I guess it's a little bit lumpy at the minute.
I'll keep an eye out for it.
Okay. Going on still about calc, the Ashford Planning Portal, which is a major bugbear to Yvonne and a pretty big bugbear to the rest of us. There was a lot of discussion about that one last week. Ashford knows the project to replace it did not go well, and that's to say the least of it, for a variety of reasons. It's still not good, but it is getting better, I think. There's training coming next week, but it's not clear whether you're the only one who can go, or any of us can go, or they're
Well,
going
I
to do
did
more
put
sessions.
it out.
Indeed.
Yes.
But we just don't know. That's going to be queried. So there's been a lot of adverse criticism. There was a lot more at the meeting. They had about half an hour of kicking. The head of planning and his boss, the director of place, space and leisure. 2 investigations into that failure, or the failures are already in hand. There's an immediate one underway, or just about underway, by the Customer Services and Digital Lead, which is going to come out and ask us all for our criticisms so they can list them all and try and work out what they're doing. Excuse me. And then there's a later one coming by councillors on the Oversight and Scrutiny Committee, which is chaired by the leader of the opposition party. I don't know if they know quite where they're going with it yet. They are where they are. One thing I was told yesterday, talking to Mick Burgess at length, is that we are all, and not unreasonably, we're all concentrating on the external offering, which is what we see. But what the new system did, which is a sort of off-the-shelf one that maybe wasn't then thought through very well, is that it's done a lot for their internal system, and apparently their internal bit is a lot better, but the external bit is pretty rubbish and not helpful at all. And I just don't think they got their minds around that, and I'm not sure if they have yet. But anyway, just believe me, they got a good telling. The last thing is that, as far as Calc is concerned, the biannual meeting of the Borough Committee Chairman across Kent, which I am one, and the county officers of Calc, with the Police and Crime Commissioner and the Assistant Chief Constable Local Policing, is this Friday, and I'll attend that up at Northfleet.
I thought it was interesting that they put out today, I think, on social media, that members of the public can have their say on the characteristics of the new Chief Constable.
I was just going to mention that. The Chief Constable, as far as I know, they always got on well with the PCC, the Chief.
Yeah.
I've never heard any different, but he is simply retiring. I mean, whether it is the end of his 5 years or age or whatever, I don't know.
Yeah.
But so the PCC has the job of finding a new one. Obviously has to be from other senior officers around. I presume that our ACC local policing is not quite high enough yet. He's very impressive.
It's very rare that the Chief Constable come from within the county.
Oh, indeed.
Yeah.
I mean, it happened.
But he came from the Met 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It happened with Surrey,
Yeah.
and now, of course, he's
He's the big man.
the big man. But it's very rare.
I should say, they do usually move. This one, I think he was Kent, went to the Met for 6 to 8 years and came back as ACC. But I think he'd probably have to be a deputy before he could jump. And I don't know how they manage on age. They run out of years. Okay, that's KCC, that's Calc then. Date of the next parish council meeting is 8th of November. Items for information, the laying of the wreath on the 13th of November.
Yeah.
I shall make the usual £100 donation.
Okay. And try and get a proper one and not
Are
an
you-
IF one.
Are you laying that rate, Jeremy?
As far as I know,
Yeah.
unless I'm unavailable for some reason.
I'm available for the church, so I'm going to have to find somebody else to do it for the... Fancy doing it too?
No?
No? Somebody's got to do it.
Does anyone else have any other items for information?
No.
I heard on the way in that the date of the coronation has been set,
6th of May.
Yes.
6th of May, so
No.
it has moved from clashing with the cup final, but as I was saying to Yvonne, it is now clashing with something else of great importance, namely Archer's birthday.
Whose birthday?
Archer's, Prince Harry's eldest.
Oh, right.
It's a blow, isn't it?
There's always something. It's true, it's factual.
I thought it was Neil Roberts' son.
So, can I close the meeting then?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Yes.
Have you-